crypto, it's seen as risk. That's probably where we are currently in the life cycle of this technology. The truth is that it's the least risky place to be, but the market's not seeing it that way. Of all the things in crypto, various narratives, stablecoins, quicker, faster, cheaper, I really get this feeling that should be in the hearts and minds of the people who are building this tech. It is the fact that we have another choice, and that choice isn't dependent on someone giving you permission. Stablecoins are a massive product market fit. If you can download essentially a US dollar-based bank account to a mobile phone in any country, anywhere in the world, that opens up huge changes in how fiat currencies are viewed. Clearly, America has some fairly developed plans in this. Crypto is a ticket to your plan B, and everyone should have one, given the situation of the world that we live in right now. Because the world doesn't care what your plan is, and you just have to have these things in your back pocket.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Rupert Pickering, and today I am delighted to be joined by George McDonough, the managing director and co-founder of KR1 PLC. George has been in the crypto space since the early days and has spent more than a decade investing in the space and backing blockchain infrastructure through KR1, which was launched in 2016 and is now listed on the main market of the London Stock Exchange. He's had a front row seat at the evolution of the crypto space, from the niche experiment that it started out as to now becoming a growing part of the new financial system we are moving towards. Welcome on board, George. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. We've been itching to get this one underway, and I'm really glad to have you here. I'd like to start off with a little bit about yourself, George, how you kind of ended up in the cryptocurrency space, because there's such an eclectic group of us here. I always find that journey, that kind of come to Jesus moment with crypto is always very insightful.
Well, I was very lucky in some sense. I was working in advertising in London, and I came across an article on Bitcoin. This is in 2011. And I remember just Googling, Bitcoin and seeing what was to come up. And I found a meetup down the road. So my office was in Shoreditch, and there was a Bitcoin meetup in Brick Lane. So I just walked after work. I walked down to this pub on Brick Lane and entered into this new world of people shouting down with the banks and I guess. What over time, what I found was that I was just amongst really interesting people. Like that Bitcoin had just drawn out all kinds of characters, as it does, and so I found myself more and more falling down the rabbit hole, talking to people about it, trying to understand. And I'll be honest, like I didn't understand how technology sort of permeates through society and at what cadence. I thought I was massively late, and that this was going to, move like wildfire across planet Earth. I mean, anyone can send any amount of money to anybody at any time, without permission. It was, but as it turned out, it was quite early, and I started to understand the technology more and more. I quit my job to go and brand Bitcoin companies. That was super early, because it turns out there weren't that many Bitcoin companies back then. But I ended up understanding the technology well enough to start describing it to institutions and banks. So I was going around London having Bitcoin breakfasts and basically describing the technology to institutions that would listen to me, and that got me into the whole Bitcoin/crypto meetup. So towards 2015, I was helping to run some meetups in London around this, trying to get as many people as possible, into a room to discuss what was going on. And that KR1 as an entity was born out of that, where my friend and my co-founder Keld and I were trying to work out how to give people access to this exciting economy that by this time we were pretty well steeped in. I'd been messing around with Peercoin, Feathercoin, Aurora Coin, like all this stuff, and what we realized was it was too early to start a fund. I mean, like people didn't even know what tokens were. but we didn't have any money. So what we did was decided to reverse into a listed shell on the Aquis exchange and sell some shares to get some meager funds to start investing into the space. And effectively what we'd created was a bridge between the crypto world and the TradFi world all the way back in 2016 to explore Ethereum and in those days Bitcoin. We had Bitcoin on the balance sheet back then, and then it just went from there, and we started allocating capital to all the projects that we thought were interesting, and we traveled around the world going to all the conferences, and it was an absolutely amazing, beautiful time. Yes, the ICO thing went completely nuts, and that's where KR1 was sort of born. But we immediately started trying to sort of filter what we were doing and filtering the projects and looking at what we were doing, and effectively, it was us, Pantera, a company out east called Kinetic Capital, and Polychain was just starting up at the time. So there were very few VCs, and it was and people wanted capital, people wanted to start projects, and so it was an absolutely amazing time for us, and right at the beginning of an incredible journey. But yeah, that's how it all began.
No, that's brilliant. And I think your story really speaks to the kind of amazing nature of the cryptocurrency space in regards to the people that it kind of pulls together. I have a background in dentistry. I didn't think that this was quite how life was going to turn out for me, if I'm being honest with you, but I'm glad it did. I met so many beautiful people. There's this kind of education that comes with getting into crypto, I think, or at least it should, not just in regards to understanding technology and looking throughout history and understanding how technologies have changed the world, whether that's the internet, electricity, cars, whatever it may be. And there's something quite similar fundamentally going on with the cryptocurrency space. But you also start to understand the financial world. And when you fall down that rabbit hole, there's this kind of awakening that takes place that's all really brought about by getting interested in crypto. And I think that's really brilliant and powerful, and one of the main sort of benefits to it. Would you say you were back then kind of like, we hear DATs get thrown around, like your micro strategies, your whoever it may be. Would you say back then you were kind of like an early DAT before DATs were even a thing?
Yeah, to a degree. So we had a treasury, right? Okay, it was very, very small, but we were stacking tokens that we found really exciting and that we found that had credible teams, and really to do that we had to travel and meet people, and that was great fun, and we've I look back with sort of tinted glasses at the places I've been that KR1 has taken me. But that's when I mentioned filter systems. That really was the filter system. It's like you couldn't invest in something that popped up as a YouTube ad, or there was so much stuff flying around in those crazy 2017 days that you had to get on a plane and go to Toronto and sit in a room with all the. It was amazing that you could do that. Like that you could go to a university campus, and every single person that you wanted to talk to in the Ethereum ecosystem was in one room, and it was a very special time, and we hoped and thought that this would explode and get bigger, but actually to live that explosion is pretty crazy, and so that's what we did, and we started allocating capital to projects that we felt had those elements of obviously decentralization and trying to solve a problem, and the whole of this space has essentially been trial and error. Satoshi gave us digital scarcity. I am a Bitcoiner at heart, but I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, and the reason for that is I feel like digital scarcity is just that big a thing that human beings are going to try and see every single possible direction that this unbelievable invention will go. And so to some degree, things like Ethereum are inevitable. We're going to try and see what works. And to some degree, it's been surprising how long it's taken. I was completely infatuated by a project called Augur, which was the original prediction market. And prediction markets completely blew my mind, even back in 2016. And so it's now that we're finally seeing prediction markets become mainstream, and that's 10 years later. And I imagine these things to be just a few months down the line, and everyone's going to be and of course Ethereum had to scale, and we went through the whole layer 2 thing, and we invested in the seed rounds of things like Cosmos and Polkadot, because we wanted to understand how these siloed blockchains were going to talk to each other. Now, that might not necessarily be a thing now, although it might be a thing in the future. And we had to look at governance, and we have to look at privacy, and there's so many different areas to this incredible invention. Anyway, so that's been our thesis from day one. It's just that there is going to be such a huge push to see where this technology can go, and we want to be a company that follows that push of innovation. And I think we've come a long way to the point where we now have the largest institutional players on earth with trillions talking about tokenizing everything. Which we can get onto, I'm sure. But I mean, in terms of pinch me moments, there've been plenty in the last few years as this technology's really begun to expand.
It's been a crazy journey. Yeah. It's been an absolutely crazy journey for sure. I mean, I was there in the ICO kind of craze of 2017. The story there kind of ends with Cryptopia. I don't know if you remember that exchange that went down. It was an Aussie exchange, I think. And, that was kind of like an FTX moment back then, but even, yeah, absolutely. And really your journey is a real insight in regards to this industry, where it's came from and where it's at today, which I kind of want to get to, because I know when I started, I was getting involved with Bitcoin. I was getting involved with, there were so many coins out there. A lot of them don't even exist today. And I think you mentioned that meetup at the pub and how everyone was kind of shouting, down with the banks, down with the banks. It kind of seems like crypto is almost doing the opposite in some sense today in regards to enabling them. And you talk about being a Bitcoiner, but not a Bitcoin maxi. I share that with you because it seems the application of this technology will far exceed just Bitcoin's use case. I mean, it's going to be in everything. You talk about, most aspects of finance are going to evolve into like a kind of chain link runtime enabled on-chain world. And this seems to be where things are going. How have you seen the space change from the early days when you were involved to perhaps where it is today and investing around that?
Well, I think what's happened is at the start it really was all about decentralization, because that was the key. That was the key that unlocked everything, was this idea that you had permissionless unstoppable money, and then we had permissionless unstoppable applications. And so we had Bitcoin and Ethereum as these key networks, as it were. And then behind the scenes, you begin to realize that these rails that we're building are cheaper, faster, quicker, and the TradFi world is going to look at that cheaper, faster, quicker, and it's going to be impossible for them to say no to it. Instant clearing, being able to understand under the hood how these transactions are working. It's too interesting to them. The problem is, of course, is control. And so the way I see it is that we're in this process of sort of bifurcation, where the most powerful entities on earth, the financial, the sort of the big Western financial institutions, are looking at this, and they're sort of taking the stuff out that is really interesting to them. And stablecoins as part of that, the Canton network, how do we move stuff around? And then the sort of permissionless decentralized element of it is still continuing. Obviously that came out through DeFi, right? So we had DeFi summer, and basically everyone at the same time realizing that we had these Lego blocks that we could build decentralized applications on. And then we had, the MakerDAO and Aave and the whole lending and Uniswap and all these beautiful, really incredible innovations that allow people to use their tokens and their assets in ways that they choose to. And so that, I think that bifurcation will continue, and we will see. And in fact, if you look at the Clarity Act at the moment, I mean, you have such a clear vision of that bifurcation, where it's like, stablecoins good, yield not so good. We do the yield. You guys can do, you can lend your stuff and so on and so forth. But actually, that act isn't actually talking about DeFi itself. It's like they've realized that DeFi is almost a separate problem to deal with further down the line. Right now, we need to work out how stablecoins work and who's going to get licenses and who's going to get permission and so on and so forth. And so is it the light and the dark? I don't know. Like there will be elements of crypto that as long as they keep pushing the boundaries of innovation forward, and then I think the TradFi world will take the elements that it wants, and it will produce, over the long arc of time, open source, decentralized, permissionless networks will win. But it's going to be a very long and windy road to that ending. That's how I see the development from the early days to now.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. It is very interesting that there's been this kind of like, I remember making a video sort of talking about the empire striking back, and sort of embracing this technology instead of kind of shunning it. And it seems that way, but there is still there's those polarities, right? There's this kind of decentralized original thesis world, and there's the other one, and they're kind of now merging interestingly, and I think ultimately leading us on to like a global value system, because the one thing that you do, talking about the education that you get when you start to look into crypto, is you get this understanding of just how fragmented the financial system is today. It's like Frankenstein's monster, right? It's been mashed together over the years, and actually crypto can kind of unify that. So it's right. It's like companies adopting the internet. You're not still going to send mail, right?
So no, completely. And it's made further complex by the fact that every sovereign nation's having, doing its own rules, right? And they're trying their best to kind of standardize that ruling. I think behind the scenes there's a lot of abbreviated, unelected bureaucratic entities out there, right? Like IMF, FATF, OFAC, Bank of International Settlements, and I think that's the underlying world of sort of sovereign nation pressure that will be brought to bear on some of these technologies. But the truth is that the whole world is in a game theory dance with each other around this technology. When you look at emerging markets and how much peer-to-peer stuff is happening in countries like Nigeria, and how much stablecoin volume is happening in Argentina and Venezuela, and there is definitely this view of like, well, in the world in which fiat currency kind of works, it's a sort of speculatory, interesting technology, and in a world where fiat currency simply doesn't function at all, it's a lifesaver. And so it really is all about context and where you sit, and how those different countries are gonna rule against this technology. And that's why I call it a long and windy road, right? Because it's just going to take a really long time to play out. But I think it's the most exciting, most interesting thing that humans are doing right now. I mean, I know that sounds like when there's war going on and all manner of extraordinary chaos. Really, I think a technology that is permissionless and allows people to, hold their assets and choose how to move those assets without permission, will eventually be a net benefit for humanity. It's just going to take a long time to get there.
100%. And I think, talking about all the kind of different contexts that countries and nations have to deal with, I always think about the situation that's currently ongoing, which we will definitely cover, and how that may or may not affect crypto. But one thing that I'm kind of riffing at the moment is how it's likely going to accelerate it. You talk about crypto offering a kind of life-saving lifeboat, or certainly financial lifeboat, it seems like a disaster like the one that perhaps we're hurtling towards with the Strait of Hormuz and the Iran situation. What you're seeing, I believe, is the potential for currencies, certainly weaker currencies, to run into real issues, like what we've already seen in South America. Now, that is only surely going to lead to the acceleration of adoption of this technology that is outside of, going from that original concept of Bitcoin, and you could transfer your Bitcoin around the world globally and kind of hedge your bets that way. Actually, now it seems like maybe a similar, more global in nature issue has arisen, and that may sort of lead the stampede towards crypto as this kind of out of one jurisdiction hedge, really,
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a definite possibility, and then in fact, that's part of that's part of the design. It's it's made for moments like that. I remember talking to gold bugs, and they're like, well, the truth is that I actually never really want to have to use my gold, because if I do, it means that the world has got to a certain situation where I have to call on this lifeline. And to some degree, Bitcoin is already used in that, and crypto more generally, because of course, stable coins are a massive product market fit. And if you can download essentially a US dollar based bank account to a mobile phone permissionlessly in any country, anywhere in the world, that opens up huge changes in how fiat currencies are viewed, and how the dollar is viewed, and how stablecoin companies, buy treasuries, and how clearly America has some fairly developed plans in this direction. And if you are in a war zone, or you are in an area of the world where your fiat currency is failing, you now have a choice of assets to use to help. Now, I think it's really important people understand that stable coins, the US dollar is a language spoken across the world, right? People understand it, but it's not decentralized, or at least those specific ones. And so you want to choose your lifeline carefully, and I'd say that mixing an understanding of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other assets alongside the stablecoin thing is probably the way to go.
Yeah, hedging your bets for sure, diversification, and let's maybe come. That's such a big topic that we can maybe reintroduce in regards to what we think the sort of effects of what's currently going on geopolitically is going to have on all of this. But let's maybe step back a bit and just talk about tokens. I know you spoke about sort of token economies, and I think it's important because crypto is very esoteric to most people. It's kind of this big word that covers a lot of different things. And tokens are something, it's amazing how many founders of projects I've interviewed, and I mention the token and they go, I can't talk about that. And I'm going, well, hang on. You need, I'm not asking you for a price prediction here or anything like that. I'm just asking you to explain what the token's role is. And that's always alarmed me, because I don't think when people invest in tokens, they really probably truly understand what they're investing in. With Bitcoin, that case is very clear cut, right? With the altcoin sector, it's a little bit different. And I think what got confirmed last week by the SEC and the CFTC was the classification of tokens attached to protocols like XRP, Ethereum, it could be whatever, as digital commodities. How do you view tokens and perhaps the opportunity that they are? Or not?
Yeah, tokens have for sure taken on so many different guises, right?
Yeah.
And from a pure way of financing a project, through
Mhm.
to governance tokens, through to fee accruing tokens. Um, the truth is that, in my view, tokens exist in order to allow a decentralized protocol to function. right? You have to have an element of value that aligns the participants in such a way whereby if they follow their financial incentives, then the protocol works. And you can see, like, in 2017, my team at KR1 decided that proof of stake was the best use of tokens, right? Like if tokens can be used to secure the network, then the network can function. And so we pushed the portfolio directly in that direction and invested in proof of stake protocols. Now, it's not the only use case for tokens at all. Governance is super interesting, right? I mean, like, these are social networks to a degree, and decisions have to be made. The issue became that so many types of protocols want to push fees to the token, right? They want to push a value that accrues on the chain from use through to the token holders, because that's part of the link, part of the flywheel that allows these things. But because of how regulations have worked, especially in the States, that last part of the equation wasn't filled properly. And so there was quite a lot of difficulty in the market to understand what they were buying. I think some months ago, I think it was Uniswap that said that, okay, well, now we're going to start pushing fees to the token because we're now in a situation where we can do that. And that I think is potentially a fairly undervalued inflection point, because now I think tokens can be viewed as a sort of full sort of life cycle. And there's also a lot of confusion around projects starting with equity and then having a token at a future date, and essentially trying to decentralize themselves once they've sort of got into orbit, as it were, and have pushed the project out there enough. And that's actually a very rare occurrence. It's very rare that a project goes full circle to full decentralization, winds down the equity part of the business, and is just floats on the token. But that's exactly where we should end up. If a token is useful and valuable to a protocol that provides some kind of function to humanity, then that's where things should end up. And that's what I would be looking to invest in, because those are the projects that will have some form of longevity going into the future, and token holders who are incentivized to hold the token and trade the token. And this is apart from memes and various other things, which is a whole other ballgame, and NFTs as well, which have sort of gone away, but
Yeah.
I have a sense might come back at some point under a different guise. But so there is a sort of a whole, as you say, a whole host of tokens and how they look. But I would say now we're beginning to enter a phase where tokens are beginning to look really interesting again, as the coordination mechanism for making these protocols work.
Yeah, you mentioning NFTs and meme coins there, I'm just getting PTSD, just
yeah,
even
I know.
Seriously.
I know.
It's
all inevitable. It's all inevitable. We are going to explore every possible machination of this technology as a species, and some of it's going to fly, and some of it isn't. Some of it's going to be the most important thing since sliced bread, and then something's going to come along and make it redundant and be like, oh God, do you remember how we used to think that was going to be the future? And I think that's okay. I think the problem is people who get really chewed up in the interim, and we've all been there. And you win some and you lose some in this game. But it is really hard to navigate this space, especially if you're new, because you have to build up. I've spent a decade building up this shield of talking to people, like meeting them, shaking their hand, like looking at their past record of what they've built and what they've exited, and who their friend. You build up this kind of like a sense of who's really trying to participate in this space, to try and push the space forward. And it is really, it's like I said, it's inevitable, but it is unfortunate that there is so much in this space that could be better. From obviously from hacks to rug pulls and to meme guy. I mean, it was all getting very strange towards the end of last year. And in some ways, you need a bear market to kind of flush that stuff out and for it to go away, and it'll come back in various ways. And my final word on that particular element is that it is the nature of being permissionless. It's the yin and the yang. You can't have this beautiful open source world and not have charlatans come in and make stuff look like what it is that you should be thinking and excited about. And it's been happening since day one. And not a shameless plug in any way, but it would be useful. It's useful to go out and find entities that are trying to sift through that for their shareholders and for their investors, to give some kind of signal as to what's real and what's not, and that's it's just part and parcel of the development of a permissionless open source technology like this.
Yep, it's why we love having people like you on the show, George. Because seriously, it's really the reason why we reached out, was because experience kind of comes through time. I think with new technologies, there's always that kind of crazy. I mean, we've spoken to a lot of people that invested in the kind of whole .com boom before it was even a boom, and they spoke about companies that nobody's ever heard of today that at one point seemed amazing that weren't, and there were charlatans about. It's just the nature of the beast. And investing is this kind of journey of being humbled consistently till you get to a point where you kind of go, oh, okay, I think I've kind of got a handle on it, or I won't make that mistake again. It's like falling off a bike. The problem is, like you say, is new people coming into the industry, which is why we do these podcasts and have people like yourself on so you can share your insight with them. It's very hard to navigate, because certainly in a world of social media, you know, I've made all the mistakes in the book when it comes to crypto. I know most of us have, and it's important for us to try and, I think, pass those messages on, not in a kind of financial advisory manner, but in a, look, this is the stories that we have to share, to stop people from ending up going through some of the similar trials and tribulations that we have. And I think I always like to focus, and I think it's important, as you sort of reiterated there more than ever, to now focus on the fundamental usage of these tokens in these protocols that may enable the world that we're moving towards. Surely there has to be value accrual there. The problem with that thesis, really barring a few chains like Tron, Hyperliquid, you know, some of these chains that are very fee generative, and thus, you know, there's a kind of token element there, or demand coming for the token from that, is that equation largely hasn't been proven out, I don't think. You know, you look at fee generation on multi-billion-dollar projects as far as market caps. Some of them are making $100, $200, $300 a day, and they've got $14, $15 billion valuations as far as, and I know market cap is a bit of an illusion, but when do you think we move away from that point of just speculation to adoption? It seems like it's happening, but like you say, gradually.
Yeah, I think that's right. It is happening. It is happening gradually, and it is done through this process of sort of cycles.
Yeah.
And you know where so dog with hat isn't a thing, and or at least it's not, and like bonk, like fart coin, like, and you I mean, I know everyone knows that those are sort of jokes, but you have to sort of understand that things shift and change, and during the bear market, as long as the people who are driven by the overall thesis of the space keep building, and those things that they build, those protocols that they build, often in DeFi, you know, get a kind of like core group of people who really like the design, and that it's you know, it's open source, and that it works, and that it's been tried and tested from a you know, audit perspective, and gradually all these little pieces come together. And there are some protocols out there that are super interesting, trying to solve some massive issues, and it's a kind of grassroots thing, and that's really what over time, like when I look at some of these projects we looked at back in the day, that started as like white papers and then became like, you know, we invested in a project called Rocket Pool that was looking at this Ethereum 2.0 roadmap, because it wanted to allow people to stake, and they started, must have been 4 years before Ethereum transitioned to 2.0. So they had a whole group of people. They were working round the clock to a destination that they had no idea was actually going to come and what it looked like when they got there. But when it happened, obviously Lido turned up as well, which we funded as well. So we funded both of those. And suddenly this blooming proof of stake element happened within Ethereum. But they were tiny little ideas at the time that gradually blossomed and so these during bear markets, it's those that form. It's those projects that are solving something and they're actually doing something real, and the token is important, and you get the grassroots following, and then it becomes something and becomes like a central pillar of the space. And I think as a VC, that's really what you're looking for. And yes, so many of these projects start that way, get high valuations, and then are either made redundant, or they don't work the way people thought they were, or they're no longer functioning in the way that people thought they would, and that's fine. And they nothing ever in crypto really dies. They just sort of zombify. And also what happens is you get quite deep pockets of liquidity trapped in these and then the whales come to play, and you get like Dogecoin, for example, is still like a massive pile of liquidity, and it doesn't really do anything other than it just allows whales to splash around, and every now and again there's a so there's a sort of functionality in that as well that comes as these like pools of liquidity. But yeah, I think overall it just takes time for these things to play out, and the winners appear. And I think at the moment, what's been really interesting to watch happen is the dwindling of the Ethereum layer 2 space, because so much of what's happened over the last 5 years has been about Ethereum not scaling. We've got the layer 2s, we have layer 1s that are quick, faster, cheaper. We had the whole Solana thing, and they're all finding their own different niches in different ways. But now the conversation seems to be coming back to Ethereum and how the layer 1 is now scaling. The main chain is now scaling in really interesting ways. The fees are much lower, and it's that gradual iteration of the underlying main chain that's now beginning to change the narrative again. And I think what it's a strange one, but one of the things that I've always thought about was that if a layer 1 project can get 5,000 people on an airplane to fly to some city in the world and hang out, then I'm interested. And no matter what happens, Ethereum, DevCon, like again and again, all of these people turn up to hang out together in a conference center somewhere, and that's really what keeps it pushing. And a layer 1 that can get me on an airplane to fly halfway around the world to hang out with people is there's something happening. It's a strange test to have, but it works. It's like where are these thousands of people who are hanging out trying to discover what the next iteration of their open source network is. And so I think there's plenty to be hopeful about, but it seems to be the market seems to be deciding who the winners and losers are. And sure, the fees that are running through these chains are signifiers that actually the product market fit isn't there, or one of the other problems. Sorry, I'm being long-winded. One of the other issues, of course, is this whole sense of build it and they will come, and it's just not the world that we're in. You can build beautiful technology that works, but if no one cares, no one cares. And I think we are in an attention economy, and we are also very much prevalent to network effects. And although we should try every possible experiment under the sun to see where this thing leads, in the end, the network effect will come into play. And I think that's why Ethereum, obviously Bitcoin's different. We can talk about Bitcoin, but that's why I think Ethereum, is coming back again and again as the main player here. And obviously when you look at fees, when you look at DeFi, when you look at that is the center of everything right now.
Yeah, it's being used. It's being used in a sort of internal manner. I mean, I always look at there's one crypto that never ever gets spoken about, and that's Tron. In all the circles I delve in, Tron never ever gets spoken about. Yet it generates like over $1 million a day. It's actually relatively been strong against Bitcoin, which is like, that's the opposite of kind of how an altcoin. And that always fascinates me, to be honest with you. I mean, we've delved into that ecosystem quite a bit and even took positions in it, just because it's like, well, it's being used with the tether fit. Obviously, they obviously announced they got audited yesterday, which is a big sigh of relief for a lot of people. Yeah, I know, interesting. The perfect word. It just seems like the focus, and this is where people like yourself and hopefully I can step in, it should be shifting from hype and speculation and that attention deficit disorder that we all have as human beings, I think, in today's world, to look, is this technology actually being used? If so, how? Of course, there's no harm in speculating on it might be used in the future, like Amazon becoming the biggest retailer in the world. But it's an interesting line to walk, I think. And I think that one interesting world that we're moving towards that's very signified is that actually we're going to be getting mass adoption from an institutional point of view. You look at what DTCC are trying to do and their announcement that they want to do this on public networks. There's going to be maybe some private involved there. You look at US Bank launching on Stellar, their stablecoin. This seems to be the world that we're moving towards. Do you think that means that the underlying tokens become valuable if they're successful in that?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on how the token is designed, but eventually, I think all roads lead to the fees and the tokens being tied together, because that is the natural fit of the flywheel. And now that America has to some degree, the largest economy in the world, has to some degree sort of sanctioned that flywheel. And with institutional flows coming on, I completely agree. I think that is the major inflection point that will push much larger volumes through these networks, and the same process that we've been through trial and error with the retail market and the believers and the those that have been in this from the beginning. We're probably going to go through that phase again, but from an institutional perspective, and institutions will choose their blockchain of choice, as it were, or create their own. And almost like the internet and the intranet days, where it's like, oh, we can't possibly plug into that horrible public dirty thing. Let's have our own pristine, and actually just lock ourselves away from where all the action is. And I think that process is all going to go through again, and they're going to have to work out, to what levels of control they can keep, and what levels of KYC are required, and how permissioned does your smart contract need to be, and these are all the various elements that these big institutions are going to look at. But again, like I said at the start, the quicker, faster, cheaper is just too big of a moth to the flame. They cannot look at this technology and not realize that it is how that the current Rube Goldberg machine of the TradFi world, where that basically disappears, and that we're going to go through this process of iteration again, but in a much larger, bigger institutional way. And it's hard to know who's going to win. I mean, it's super interesting to watch Tron do its thing. I mean, it had a much like Tether, not wanting to produce any Tether FUD or anything, because it looks like that's going to go out the window pretty soon if they do an audit. But like a lot of these, had very murky beginnings. Decentralized money and decentralized applications are a very worthy thing to spend one's thinking about and worrying about and trying to innovate on, because it really is our best chance of trying to build something that allows us to sort of move into the future with more autonomy. And as things get slightly more unstable, you can see the
case there.
Well, yeah, because there is a heightening of control happening
Yeah.
across the globe, and I think some of that is in preparation for more of humanity coming to understand how the system works
Yep.
and how inflation, really does crush your time and your effort.
Yeah.
And so it's not a surprise that things like Tron are so big, because very much like, I mean, Tron is Ethereum to a degree. I mean, they're almost identical, but different countries will gravitate towards the ones that get the network effect. And if Tron gets the network effect in a country, then that country will use that. And it's more a it's less to do with Tron itself and more to do with the fact that it's a general signifier that some of this stuff is really useful.
Yeah.
And it almost doesn't matter what the brand is, as long as people find it useful and are using it. So.
Yeah, as long as the applications there. Certainly, you talk about South America. It's. I mean, there's airports that are. There's like tether signs instead of their kind of native currency, and it's like, okay, well, a lot of that's happening on Tron. We also find very interesting use cases with tether. We speak to a lot of central banks. We've interviewed many of them, and I think it's the Dutch central bank regulator Euro stablecoin, and they use tether as a liquidity pool to enable kind of cross-border transactions. So actually, there's this interesting. I mean, it's always kind of been done like that with the dollar. The dollar's always been that kind of link globally because of the liquidity in it. But now actually it's going to stable coins being used as that. And actually XRP obviously tried that and are still trying that with their on-demand liquidity aspect of their coin. Actually, Tether's kind of doing that now as far as going from euros to pesos or whatever it may be. Let's talk about the situation unfolding today as you see it. I think we can all agree we're in a bear market, or it certainly feels like that. What's your read on this situation that's unfolding, and what do you think the result of it is? I mean, that's quite a hard question to ask, but maybe not. Yeah, I mean, there's many moving parts, but I'm talking about Iran. It doesn't seem good, right?
Yeah, no, it really doesn't, because we don't know where it's going to go.
Yep.
There's a path to, not all is forgiven, but we've made friends, we've had talks, the Hormuz is going to open, and let's not poke that hornet's nest again, all the way through to boots on the ground, and we're staring at something that's going to play out over years, and the outlook of the world is very different depending on which path that goes down. And all financial assets are tied up in this in various ways, because obviously oil is the at the very base layer of everything. And if inflation, what countries are already on their knees in certain ways in terms of their welfare systems, and in terms of being in debt, and energy costs. I mean, obviously I'm born and brought up in the UK, and there's all manner of chat about being a crypto hub and an AI data center place, but then you look at the price of energy and you're like, well, actually, there's pretty much every other country on earth before the UK that's actually going to receive any of this stuff from because of the price of electricity, right? So it's just maths at the end of the day, and that is going to play out across the whole globe depending on how this goes. Now, from a digital asset perspective, it's made for this moment, or at least it should be. People should understand that certainly when you want to transact, and you want to do it in a way that is separate to the third-party risks that come with being in centralized institutions, right? Centralized institutions in a state of war change. They're like, sorry, there is no money today, or unfortunately, due to the state of emergency, it turns out that we need 150 different types of ID for you to get your money, like, or whatever it is. It's like things change, right? The situation changes, the regulations can change in a moment. And if you have something that does not have that change built into it, so it's like you have this thing, you know that in a push that you can push it into a something like Uniswap, and you can change it through to something that you can then use. Everyone will have a different idea about what assets that is. Like some people want to, there'll be gold-backed tokens, or people will have different views on what those are. But essentially, I can have this thing, I can hold this thing, and then I can change it into this other state, and then use it in a world of ever-expanding chaos. Becomes hugely useful. And what might happen is, if we do go down this long dark road, more and more people will come to that conclusion, where people say it's not backed by anything, there's no intrinsic value. Well, maybe the intrinsic value is just the fact that you don't need permission to use it, and that in itself has value. And the fact that you can cross borders, of course, when there's chaos in the world, people move, and if you can move with your wealth, 24 words in your head. I'm not suggesting you do that, but you can.
Probably write it down somewhere as well, because I mean, my memory, I wouldn't trust that at all.
No, me too, right? But there is an inherent use case in this technology, which is, I wouldn't say perfect for these kind of scenarios, but its use case becomes far more obvious during times of, and let's hope it not, it doesn't go there. But yeah, so we'll see how things pan out. But overall, I would say it's what this technology is made for.
Yeah, it's just getting to that point, that realization point. To people like me and you, that's perhaps obvious right now, and we're probably already hedging our bets in some way, shape, or form. But it just, this situation, to me, I mean, it's look, I've been extremely bullish on markets since 2023, and the altcoin market's been annoying, to say the least. Since then, certainly in the face of the S&P doing what it's done, look at stocks like Broadcom. I mean, they've all done so well since we made that macro call. For the first time since January the 5th, 2023, I went, nah, I don't want to play. I don't want to play right now. This is not. There's nothing about this situation right now that makes me want to play in the road. I'll play in the road if it's worth the risk. Right now, I'm going. I don't have an amazing read on it. Technically, I think most of your major indexes across the board have broken down. I also think you've got this oil situation. Last week, what we saw with yields, I'm going, this just, nothing about this feels good.
100%. And where do you go in that situation? Because you can move to cash, but you can only do that for a period of time, right? It's not a panacea, and you have to spend quite a lot of time and energy thinking about this stuff, and hope that the situation on the ground changes so that sense of confidence can come back, and then you can put your cash to work. And I think gold has had an extraordinary run, as we know, and there are plenty of reasons behind that, and some of them are quite scary as well, right? I mean, there's like, when you see gold do that thing, as a canary in the coal mine, you think, my God,
what's coming?
What's coming? What's signifying this? And obviously it's come off a bit, as things do when they get overheated, but it's
more systemic.
there are red flags all over the place, and I don't blame you in the sense, and you're part of that move out of the riskier assets, in a strange way, will affect crypto negatively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's seen as risk, and I think that's probably where we are currently in the life cycle of this technology. The truth is that it's probably the least risky place to be, but the market's not seeing it that way. I mean, Bitcoin in self-custody, Ethereum in self-custody, is a sort of superpower.
Yeah.
In certain regards, especially depending on your context, right, and where you are in the world, and the life that you're leading. But the very fact that you have that at your disposal is hugely positive. And I think, again, the reason why we should continue to work and innovate on this technology is to ensure that lifeline is there, because the centralized world is very susceptible to what's going on in its location. And we've seen time and time again, over and over, financial systems blow up in countries, and people are left to pick through the rubble and work out what how to rebuild their lives. I've sort of firsthand saw it. I was obviously much younger, but the Ecuadorian government turned to the dollar, and overnight the sucre was pretty much worthless. And it's like you could have worked your entire life to build up something for retirement, and then you wake up the next morning and it's like, well, it's gone. And well, what does that mean? And what do I do? And it's not the only example, but there's plenty. And of all the things in crypto, of all the various narratives that are there, and stable coins, quicker, faster, cheaper, and of all the things that we should be working towards, I really get this feeling that should be in the hearts and minds of the people who are building this tech. It is the fact that we have another choice, and that choice isn't dependent on someone giving you permission.
Yeah.
So that's in a very dark world, that's some light.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. I think that is crypto's positioning. Again, it's just a path to that, and it's we spoke a bit off camera about Trump's maybe social experiment as far as or how vocal he's been, or I don't know, the word probably isn't vocal, but his communication via social media. And actually, I think what I'm getting a sense of now is that there's kind of a turning. Even including myself, I actually thought Trump would be quite good for the American people and economically, and all this kind of deregulation. And I've followed Scott Bessent for years. He's a legend in the financial. I mean, truly. I can go on and on about that. And even now, I'm kind of going, all of this seems a little bit reckless. It doesn't. I'm not quite buying what I'm being told. And I think when you enter that paradigm of somebody not being believed anymore, to a degree, obviously there's lots of things I believe him on. As an investor, how do you put your foot on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because you're trying to get a steer on what's going on, and if you can't find any signal in the noise, like in theory, the presidential missives that come out from the White House should be signal, right? And I totally take your point that we're now in a world where we have to assess the signal to the degree where almost everything is got a question mark over it, and the markets yo-yo around, right? So it's like, oil's going to be cheap again, or oil's going to go to and it does sort of give you the sense that there isn't really a coherent plan, and if there was a coherent plan, it's no longer coherent, and we actually don't know what's going to happen one minute to the next. And I've always described it as I've always thought of it as like basically like you're flowing down a river in a current, right? And you don't know where the current's going to take you, because the truth is that none of us have any idea what conversations are happening in the background between these huge entities. We don't know what deals have been made. And really, as a sovereign individual, okay, I mean, this is the crypto head talking here, but the truth is that you need options, and you need different forms of assets. I see passports and residencies as assets. I think you need to be able to get out of that current and into a different current if you need to. And again, that's the sort of privilege talking there, that if you have that ability to to build resilience into your life in a way that you have assets that you can take with you, and those assets are globally recognized in the way of crypto, and you have the ability to take yourself out of the situation that you're in and put yourself in another situation. To me, that seems what the future, in a world where you can't trust the signal, that's sort of what you're left with. You're left with the need to be able to get up and go, and crypto is part of that story, right? And it's in some ways sad that seems to be the direction that we're heading, but at the same time, we'll have to face reality, and different jurisdictions treat you differently. And I mean, the Dubai thing is like completely mind blowing at the moment. I mean, the safe haven sense that place gave, only for it to be not the case. And that's what I mean by resilience, right? So it's like if I had set up shop in Dubai, for all the great things that it provided, I'd still have had a plan B and a plan C, because the world doesn't care what your plan is, and you just have to have these things in your back pocket. And again, not everyone can have the privilege to do that, right? And to have different ways of having assets that can get you out. But we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I love listening to people who think that they do and have some kind of special insight. It's fascinating. But that's another use case for crypto. Crypto is a ticket to your plan B, and everyone should have one, given the situation of the world that we live in right now.
I absolutely love that. In an uncertain world, crypto gives us certainty to a degree, of course. And it certainly gives us that alternative, and that's really what, for me, Bitcoin was all about initially. I know it was for you. This alternative sort of peer-to-peer system. I think that's morphed a little bit. Maybe some people agree with Roger Ver and his take. Maybe some people don't. I mean, that's a whole other podcast, realistically. So we don't want to get into the small versus big block debate, but it's interesting. It's interesting. Crypto is so interesting for many reasons. Just the technology alone and what it's going to enable, the convergence of other technologies into crypto. You talk about AI and that being a real accelerant. The kind of geopolitical front that is forming now and how that also accelerates it. It kind of feels to me in some way that it's almost like a divine plan, crypto. I know that we're so good in crypto at like glamorizing things. I've been doing it for years because I truly believe in this space, but I truly do believe when I say this that crypto just seems to find itself beautifully at the convergence of quite literally everything.
It's because it's money.
Yeah.
And because because it, it's a technology that permeates into everything. Have you seen the video by Joe Bryan? What the problem is?
I don't think so.
No. You'd love it. It's a really interesting take on what happens when human beings find themselves on an island, and
Okay.
one side of the island creates fiat currency and the other side of the island doesn't, and it's all about how humans specialize. And as soon as you have specialization, then you build houses and I sell fish, and you want fish and I want a house, and you have this situation where, like, natively as human beings that specialize, we need money. It's just where things lead to, and then that money becomes the sort of the way in which we interact with each other, because of the fact that we need resources, right, to survive. And crypto is money, although it comes in a very myriad of different ways. Like ETH is money to pay for decentralized applications to run on Ethereum, and Bitcoin is something entirely different as well, store of value, so on and so forth. And then there's that sort of range of different tokens and their use cases, some interesting, some not interesting. But the fact that it seems to appear at these moments in time where we're all kind of like searching for answers is because I think it is that technology to us, and it's just taking its time to sort of enter into the hearts and minds of people. I think it's fairly inevitable that that's where it goes, because our time is what we have. We turn that time into money so that it gives us optionality later on, and we can use it to buy resources so that we can survive. And we now have better money, and that's just that's just the truth of it. And if you can print something for nothing, which me and you have to work all day for, that's not going to work. And that's why I would say this Joe Bryan video is brilliant, called "What's the Problem," which is all about money printing. And so yeah, so I think that's why that's happening. And again, that's why we should be working round the clock to see where this technology goes in all its different facets. We have this whole agentic revolution coming, which is super interesting. A huge amount of Ethereum is already machine to machine. And then we have the stablecoin thing coming, which is almost feels like a sort of impending tsunami, because fiat currencies are the language that we speak at the moment. Many of us are beginning to speak this crypto language as well. But in the interim, the stablecoin thing is just going to be absolutely huge. And then of course we have this problem with privacy, and it's like, well, okay, well, if everything's running on blockchains, where does privacy come into the conversation? And how do we create a way whereby we can allow these vast flows of stable coins and interaction, and obviously institutions, while at the same time allowing a layer of privacy so that you can allow free markets to still work? And then of course we have the whole sort of real world asset thing as well, and all the tokens and the one ledger that BlackRock want. And I'm like, I mean, it's
infinite.
It's almost infinite, and the reason why it's infinite is because it's money. And it's flowing through every possible facet of how we interact with each other. One of the surprises I've felt is actually how long it's taken for that to sort of seep in. It's strange. I live in a world where I've thought about money and the systems of money and tokenization and all of that, but it is, people are just getting on with their lives, right? But it is interesting how something that's so fundamental to how we exist as a species often just goes completely unthought about. And the actual underlying system of how all this works. It does happen sometimes when you walk into a bank and you ask for $3,000 in cash to buy a moped for your son, and the bank's like, no. And then you get this moment, well, hang on, wait, what?
I think that saying is a true one: ignorance is bliss. And I always hesitate to use that, because if there's one thing you don't want to do, it's insult people. But it's not really insulting. I think it's more just, we're a collection of the experiences that we've had in life, and that sort of shapes us. When I was in Bosnia, we were visiting some pyramids in Bosnia. Most people don't know Bosnia has pyramids, or allegedly it does. We went to see them. The jury's still out for me, but I don't want to get into that and upset anybody. I was asking our guide, because the Bosnian mark is obviously pegged to the euro. And I was asking him about money, as I always do. I like to sort of poke the hornet's nest a little bit, or it was more like a bee's nest, really, I guess. And he was like, so how does the euro how does your currency work? And then, okay, well, how does the euro work? Oh, well, the gold that they have. And I just thought, And it's amazing how many people in the world still believe that currency is backed by gold.
Well,
I don't understand the debt system.
It's a really useful thing for a sovereign state to
propagate.
To
Absolutely.
Propagate. I think everyone should read the fiat standard and the Bitcoin standard, obviously. And I think there are certain books out there that, for me, my those were very powerful books to read. And personally, like my whole crypto journey was to some degree based around Andreas Antonopoulos and his view and his books in the early days, and then there are others that have sort of permeated through that really kind of like drop the veil, and you're like, wow, this is. But I think those. It's really important to understand how these systems are built and how you have a choice now to a degree, and it's you can't force it down people's throats. Obviously, they need to go and find it themselves. But I really applaud people who spend their time trying to educate about this, because and again, props to Andreas for bringing so many of us into this world in terms of crypto and understanding its importance. But yeah, I mean, gold back. It doesn't surprise me that people see the world still in that way, and yeah, I think it feels like it's only a matter of time until people stop thinking about it in that way. It just so happens that your particular financial system hasn't blown up, and you've decided to ask where the gold is, and many others have obviously blown up, and there's no gold, and never was. Yeah,
Interesting shift.
it's a tricky situation.
Interesting shift coming. This isn't just about finance. This is literally about social. This sort of social dynamics of things, and there's so much going on here. And again, crypto is at the convergence of it, as you say, because it's money and its value. George, this has been an absolute pleasure. Where can we send people that want to find out more about what it is you do and KR1 PLC?
Well, yeah, KR1.io is our website. You can find us obviously under the ticker KR1. What we've tried to do as a company is provide people access to the digital assets economy through picking projects that we feel represent our and me and my team's sense of this technology. And I think we've been fairly successful at doing that. Not so much, obviously we've picked very good things, but it's also what we haven't invested in. And I think, and hopefully as an educational entity as well, because we do have to do a lot of talking about this technology to investors and to shareholders. Hopefully we can provide some guidance through this weird and wonderful world that Satoshi made, amongst many others, obviously. And so yeah, you can, and we obviously have a Twitter profile as well, so you can find us there. And yeah, looking forward to talking to anyone who wants to get in touch, and yeah, we can talk about all of these subjects that we've touched on today at any point.
Yep, ladies and gentlemen, you know exactly what to do. There's links in the description. George, your time has been absolutely appreciated. I've learned a lot. I know my audience would have. Thank you very much, and we hope to have you on soon.
It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me.